This is The Bagel Report, a podcast exploring Jewish representation and identity in popular culture, with your hosts Esther Kostanowitz and Erin Ben Moshe, and now a production of J, the Jewish News of Northern California.
Hey, Esther, how are you?
Oh, I've been better, but my voice is like a little bit lower than usual. I'm not trying out a new character here on the Bagel Report.
We love it. It feels like a very good intro because we bagels play multiple voices. And this week, the big chunk of our episode will be very vignette focused. So I think we're right on theme here.
Obviously, we're going to be talking about History of the World, part 2, at some point later. But, I think that if we had like journalists who created an all-star team of podcasters to play different roles, I have like every reason to believe that we would be selected for such a thing, with all of our various accents and character impersonations. Yes?
100%. So anyway, let's get to our newy and Jewy because some newy and Jewy things happened while we were away, Esther.
True story. True story.
And I think the biggest one is that we got a very mean tease for the final season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And I say mean because it wasn't a trailer. It wasn't even a teaser. It was like a moving poster.
Yeah.
That told us April 14th. And it was like a beautiful photo, half photo, really, of Midge.
Right. I want to say that it was kind of like those Harry Potter moving photographs. That's kind of what it was. Or they have it on the red carpet nowadays where they do the 360
slow-mo.
spin.
Yeah. Also, you were very cruel because we're all loving it. We're all obsessed. We're both freaking out. And then you text me and you go, it's going to be a dream sequence, isn't it? And I'm like, well, Esther, why would you do that?
Look, it's as much... I don't have any knowledge or information, so it's just like what I'm looking at, and I'm looking at Midge in a red dress, and we know her signature color is pink, and we know that she's worn a lot of black for her, formal events. Then the question is, like, what would she be on a red carpet for? What would she be dressed up wearing red for? And I don't know. I just had a feeling that it's a dream sequence, but I could obviously be 100% wrong because, like you said, there was no actual content in the trailer. Any more predictions that you have based on those 3 seconds of trailer footage?
No, but I'm really hoping that those last moments of Lenny Bruce saying, like, you're going to break my heart if you mess this up. Like, I hope that is the driving force that takes her wherever she needs to be. This show has been a part of our lives for a really long time now. And I really want it to end on a bang and not end on a flop. But just like Aaron Sorkin, Amy Sherman-Palladino can sometimes end on a flop. Like, after she left Gilmore Girls, the show wasn't so great. I mean, it was good, but like it didn't have the same heart. Some of the characters kind of became annoying. And I'm really hoping that like she drives Midge home. Like, I hope everyone gets what they want at the end. I know that's not how TV or life works, but I'm really rooting for these characters.
Right. Well, I heard also that it might end with like, don't stop believing, and then like fade to black.
No, because that didn't work the first time. No, it's not. I swear to God, if it ends like Cheers, where like we were in love with the bar the whole time. Shut up. No, absolutely not. No way. What a waste. Yeah, I'm hoping this is...
Is that the way it ended? I don't even remember that.
Cheers ended where they were all back at the bar. Diane comes in and you like think there's something going to happen. Nothing happens. And then I don't remember if it's Norm or someone goes like, yeah, it was always the bar, wasn't it? Like that was always your love. And then everyone leaves and it's just him. And then he goes, we're closed. And it's just him in the bar. And that's how it ends. The alcoholic just ends up loving the bar. Ugh. Not poetic, stupid.
Wow. I feel like maybe a future episode should be us like reviewing the end episodes of various popular TV shows and seeing if they were appropriate now with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't really like season 3. I mean, we liked it, but like we really were like, where's it going? We want the momentum. But the first 2 seasons were the momentum, and the 3rd season was like a slow burn. So now, April 14th on Amazon Prime, we're going to see what that was moving toward, if anything. So I'm excited.
And do we know how many episodes we're getting on April 14th?
I also just want to correct myself. There's 4 seasons. The 4th season was the slow burn. We're in the 5th season now. The final season is coming out on April 14th.
Yeah, it's hard to remember because these seasons are like so far apart in terms of their launches and their availability. And we've logged a lot of podcast hours talking about these shows. So
there's also 9 episodes, but we only have 1 picture. So like we don't have any episode descriptions. It's like a picture of her in a taxi, and that's it.
They are actually consistently mean to their fans with these teasers.
It's really cool. And
I won't miss this approach.
Yeah, but we're already look, we spent 3 minutes talking about a moving poster. So, they know what they're doing. But in case you don't want to rewatch all of the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel up until this month, although I think you could get through it from now until when the show comes out next month. Alex Borstein has a comedy special coming out a few days later, April 19th. So you can watch the first episode or maybe all of them. We don't know if they're dropping them at the same time, but you can check out Alex Borstein, which is very cool because I don't remember her ever having a live special where anyone can check out.
Yeah, I don't remember that either. I mean, she's obviously done a lot of comedy, both on screen and behind the screen as a voice actor, has made a very good living doing that and, has made her reputation on that. But I appreciate the fact that they're giving her own comedy special because one of the things that's always been a little inconsistent about the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is that Susie really should be on stage. Mm-hmm. She's hilarious.
Yeah.
And Midge, is glamorous and, has her own shtick and she can be funny, but really, Susie really does have a personality made for stand-up. So it's interesting to have the real life portrayer of Susie have her own comedy special. Also on Amazon, so they're aware of the opportunity for tie-in.
Next on Newy and Jewy, the Anti-Defamation League has created the Entertainment Leadership Council.
They certainly did. Obviously, all jokes about Jews and entertainment aside, because if we made those jokes, we would be reported to the Anti-Defamation League's Entertainment Leadership Council. But the goal here is to defang both abrasive anti-Semitism, which is Jonathan Greenblatt, who's the CEO and national director of the ADL, says is kind of like what's happened with Kanye West or the National Day of Hate. That's the kind of anti-Semitism that's in your face, aggressive, often violent. And also erasive anti-Semitism, which he defined as when Jewish stories don't get told or when Jews are not included. So we are obviously totally on board with that. We want to eradicate all the kinds of anti-Semitism, but, this anti-Semitism of erasure or omission is something that we are particularly aware of.
I'm interested in this because the ADL is a very active organization. And so I feel like they would document it a lot faster than some of these other newer groups. I'm just nervous by what they define. It's very easy to see and name the in-your-face aggressive anti-Semitism. But then when you find the nuanced versions that kind of lead for more discussion, I wonder if they're equipped to do that. Because I feel like you also need to have an understanding of culture, pop culture, entertainment. And I don't know if the ADL has that. I don't know who's in their corner to help give them context in this situation,
Yeah, I don't know either. The ADL it's a long-standing brand, obviously. I believe there have even been jokes on Saturday Night Live about the ADL in the past. And I think that, one of the challenges that we see is that there's a lot of goodwill in terms of launching an organization, whether it's the Me Too, Time's Up kind of stuff, which, has to an extent fizzled. And you also have the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance, which we talked about regarding You People. And, I don't remember them responding at all, which I think was a missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. But maybe that's not how they define their role. But the ADL is certainly does respond to these kinds of things when they appear. So I think, the idea of You People, as an example, because they mention it in the article. The article is in Variety and written by Melina Saval. And so that this body will respond to things like you people, which Greenblatt himself noted was potentially dangerous to the Jewish community. I think we can rely on them for those kinds of responses in the future. But, we've done a lot of podcast hours also about you people. And, I think that where you and I fall, which people can, of course, revisit in detail in previous episodes, is that it had tremendous potential. And there were a couple of things that came up that we thought were really interesting and could have been explored further. But because they didn't, a lot of the things that they said about Jews were just left hanging without being challenged. Mm-hmm. And that's something that Jonathan Greenblatt said about you people also, that the film was making an effort, even if a flawed one, to challenge prejudices.
And is it like only for anti-Semitism? Because I know the ADL just tracks all hate. So is it also protecting other marginalized communities?
Yeah, the article did say something about that. I mean, obviously the focus is on Jewish hate right now and anti-Semitism, mm-hmm. but the opening paragraph of the article says that the group's mission is to combat societal hate, including anti-Semitism. So, the ADL has been around for over 100 years, and they've been fighting anti-Semitism a long time. And also, fighting hate of all kinds is definitely part of the work of fighting anti-Semitism. But, this specific space of this entertainment, Jewish, what's offensive, what's not, this is an area that they've weighed in on before, and I'm mm-hmm. sure they'll weigh in on again. And it'll be interesting to track as we move forward.
And on this, the other day, Arnold Schwarzenegger posted a 12-minute video. I'm not sure who it was. I mean, I think it was for anti-Semites and racists. It was literally a dead to camera calling out hate groups, telling them it's not too late to change their ways. So much so that they're like saying, you don't want to be a loser. He says this, you don't want to be a loser. You don't want to be weak. You want to be strong. And like the way you be strong, move away from a group that will never win and learn from your mistakes and grow stronger. And it's the strangest call to action I think I've ever seen. Have you seen this?
I have not seen it, but I have seen previous Arnold Schwarzenegger videos.
It's very in line to the previous videos that he's made.
I'm glad he's staying on brand. Right.
I love it.
Hello, my name is Arnold Schwarzenegger from California. And
it's like the Terminator telling you to stop being a racist.
Right. Well, I mean, who better? Because, he'll go back in time and stop you before you are born or something like that. Isn't that the plot of the Terminator? I think so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. We'll have to chase down that clip, and I'll have to give it a watch.
Yes, it's fascinating. And watch with the subtitles too, because I think you need to also see the words in order to kind of believe them and hear them at the same time. So go check it out. And there was a Jewish Hallmark movie that came out mid-end February. February is a short month, but the fact that Hallmark snuck this movie in, and it's not about Hanukkah, but it's Jewish, Esther. What? And it has a golem.
Yep, it has a golem, which actually, like I said, we're going to get to History of the World Part 2 later, but there's a section where they talk about a golem, but they say a golem.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that's what they meant, but I mean, potato to potato?
Yeah. Golem. Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously we have, the golem, from the Lord of the Rings, who says, I want the precious, the precious.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Smeagol, that kind of guy. You guys missed my impressions, right? Okay. Well, I didn't hear about this until after it aired, but I think the characters are named Rachel and David because of course they are. Is that the story?
Because of course they are. It's called Made for Each Other. And it's a girl named Rachel. And that's of course. And a sculptor named David. And somehow she accidentally, or on purpose, she sculpts the perfect man, which ends up being a golem. But the golem ends up being brought to life. So this sculpture is the perfect man. And now she's oh no, is this the guy for me? Or is I think maybe David the guy for me? So the trailer feels very Jewish. There is no mention of a menorah or Hanukkah. There is a Seinfeld reference. Again, it's still very surface level Ashkeforward. Like, that's my new word instead of Ashkenormative. Like, it's very Ashkeforward.
Right. It might only have the barest of notes of plurality and inclusivity, but it is it is a blend that is Ashkeforward.
Yes, 100%. Thank you for getting me. It's still probably incredibly cringy, but I love that Hallmark is allowing Jewish culture to exist in a not holiday space, in a like Hanukkah, blue and white against green and red. Like, I think that's kind of great, whether or not the movie's great.
Right. Which I'm going to guess it's probably not. But I'm wondering also how much of the actual mysticism of the golem they actually incorporate. You know, there's a whole like ritual to bring a golem to life. And there's the word emet, which means truth. But in Hebrew, it has 3 letters. And if you erase the aleph, then you're left with met, which means dead. And that's how you get the golem to deactivate. So is by erasing one of those letters. And various TV shows have had golems to varying inclusions of Kabbalistic kind of elements of it. So I'm going to guess that there's probably not a lot of Jewish mysticism in this production, but I would be very happy to be proven wrong.
I think there might have to be a little bit, because if they use golem by name, I think, and then they bring it back, and then in order for, I imagine the sculpture does not stay in the picture for long, that she chooses the human being instead of the perfect man, because the perfect man doesn't exist. That's where I'm thinking this story goes. And in order for to do that, you have to get rid of the golem. So, you know, we'll have to see. Let us know. Let Esther know.
Let me know if I need to see this.
But you did see Mark Maron's new HBO special. Would you recommend that for our bagel listeners?
I did, and I would, especially since a lot of people don't really know Mark Maron except from his podcast. Mm-hmm. It was super dark, and it's appropriate that it's dark because he lost his partner, Lynn Shelton, during the pandemic, not to COVID, but it kind of doesn't matter. Anyway, so because she died very suddenly, and he had a lot of challenges around her passing, obviously, and in the aftermath, missing her and trying to adapt to the world without her and doing this all during the pandemic. But he also has a significant portion where he talks about his relationship to his Jewish identity and the way in which Jewish ritual was helpful to him. He doesn't drill down into too much of it, but he does credit Michaela Watkins, ECAR member and Reboot alum and all around great performer, with making sure that he was taken care of. And I think she made him sit Shiva or something like that. Anyway, it's dark, but it's real. And so if you're in the mood for that, then check it out. I would also say in terms of like stand-up comics dealing with grief, you could also check out Patton Oswalt's special that he did right after. The first one after his wife died suddenly also. And I think that the ability to take this deepest pain of sudden and tragic loss and turn it into something that people can see and see themselves in, and also be in community with that person as they're going through their process on stage. I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's amazing. A lot of people have said good things about Mark Maron's special. So definitely check it out and let us know what you think. And to wrap up our newy and Jewy, it was Purim this week, and it's a fun holiday. Like, I love seeing people dress up and get really excited to hear a story that is kind of dark and all over the place and a little problematic. But it's just very fun to see my news feed pop up with so many funny skits and sketches. And if you're in the mood for a hilarious skit, yes, we both go to ECAR in LA, but on their Instagram is their take on Nicole Kidman's AMC intro. And a lot of people don't know what this is because they don't have an AMC theater nearby. But in LA, there's literally one next to every Starbucks. So everybody has seen this intro, and I think they do a great job with it. And I just go check it out. I think ECAR knocks it out of the park. It's very funny.
I find the original, which it parodies, to be completely unpalatable. You can check it out if you'd like. If you go to an AMC theater, you won't have a choice because you're just going to see it. So enjoy.
Yeah. And I think we should take a break. And when we come back, we will talk about what everyone's been waiting for, which is History of the World Part 2.
We are back. Just like History of the World is back after premiering in 1981.
It's kind of misleading because it says History of the World Part 2, but it's like in 8 parts. So that could have been played better.
Yes. I mean, Erin, let me just do the math for you. So because it's History of the World Part 2, but it's in 8 parts. So it's really like History of the World Part 2, Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, 5.6.7, and Part 8. So, if they go back to movies for Part 3, I'm not sure what happens with all of this math, quite honestly. I should never volunteer to do the math on these things.
It's okay. We don't have to do math. Who needs it? Okay, so the show is on Hulu, but the movie you can watch in kind of a lot of different places, but depending on your subscription level, you have to pay for it, or you just have to pay for it.
Yeah, I think you just have to pay for it. But, it is really such a classic. I actually bought it on Amazon Prime Video because, to rent it was something like $3.99, and then it was like $4.99 to buy it. So I was like, I think I'll just buy it and have it and, maybe show it to my nephews at some point or something like that.
Yeah. And I think, so each episode's about 27-ish minutes. It's supposed to be theoretically a half hour, but the movie's only an hour and a half. So I think they wanted to do more expanding into these little vignettes. So I get that it's a TV show, because also to make a sequel, when TV is dominating everything, okay, it makes sense. You would turn this remake into a series. But it was basically, the executive producers were Nick Kroll, Ike Barinholtz, right? That's how you say his last name, and Wanda Sykes. And they are pretty much in almost every single sketch, for better or for worse.
Sometimes both.
Yes. But in case you forgot what the 1981 Mel Brooks movie was about, it was basically his, take on the history of mankind. And it covered everything from the Old Testament, which is the 10 commandments, or, the French Revolution, or the Spanish Inquisition.
Yes, unforgettable.
Just all of these very funny, honestly iconic lines that everybody still quotes to this day probably came from Mel Brooks. The show is kind of similar. He still has his hand in it. He's still the narrator. He has a funny little CGI moment in the beginning and in the end. And then the theme song, I can't stop hearing Spaceballs.
I was thinking the same thing. There is a musical motif in there that I think is the same.
Yeah.
But I would have to enlist my musician friends in telling me if I'm accurate on that.
And there's a couple Easter eggs throughout the series that kind of call back to other things that Mel Brooks did in his career. There is a Spaceball reference. There is a Blazing Saddles little joke in there. There's some funny little gag humor where someone looks to their left, the other person looks to their left, and then someone else looks to the left and no one's there. Just kind of old screwball comedy that you don't really
slapstick.
See anymore.
Yeah.
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 So it's nice to see those things peppered in. Yeah. I mean, what did you think, Esther?
Well, I do think that the sketches are much more short form than in Mel Brooks's original movie. And they're also non-consecutive, which historically non-synchronous, I don't know, something to do with time. But basically, whereas the movie started with the dawn of man and then continued straight through, spending time in different time periods and spending a significant amount of time in Rome where you meet characters that then you follow through the rest of the movie. This is not like that.
Mm-hmm.
There are some characters that follow and repeat in different vignettes. I was surprised by some of these choices. I think that because there's a more of a millennial social media aware, meme oriented kind of approach to this, there's a lot of anachronistic presence of social media platforms in ancient times. So you have Galileo, for instance, on a service called Galileo, I think, which is about Cameo.
Yeah.
But also, which Cameo is a service by which celebrities can record. You can pay celebrities to record special messages to your friends. He was on that. He was on the, was it
Tico Taco or something like that.
Tiki Taki or something like that. That was like TikTok, but for Italian. And, it was fine. It was a choice. But you happened to mention things that in our notes about how aware of trends they were.
I think what always surprises me about watching Mel Brooks is that everything he touches on feels really in the moment. Like he really knows how to encapsulate a certain time. He knows how to call out BS and put it in a space where like they wouldn't normally be that socially aware. So the fact that like they wrote this, I mean, the news about this came out like over a year ago. And the fact that they picked up on the trends that they knew would be relevant right now. Specifically, there's a joke that Galileo makes on TikTok about Borgs, and those are called blackout rager gallons. They're it's a giant TikTok trend on college parties. And it's so much of a fad that just this past weekend during a St. Patrick's Day party at University of Massachusetts, more than 28 ambulances had to go to the school because people were using these Borgs and they got sick. And so everyone's okay. But the fact that like that happened on Saturday, this episode came out this week, and it was such a quick and you miss it joke. I was like, oh my God, like they totally had a pulse. And these people are not in college anymore. The writers are not, they're older. They're well established in their careers, and they never had anything like this when they were in college. And the fact that they scoured the internet and said, yeah, this is going to be big. Let's use that. And it happens a couple times. Even like picking the sketches that they chose, it was I'm so surprised at how relevant it feels, because even Big Mouth didn't even feel that relevant. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't trying to be, but this just felt like a really good time capsule of what 2023 is.
Right. I do think it's a very much like a Big Mouth aesthetic. Obviously includes a lot of the creative talent that's behind Big Mouth, most notably Nick Kroll, and most notably absent John Mulaney.
Yes. I think he was dealing with something a year ago, which is maybe why he wasn't involved.
He was dealing with something a year ago. But, I feel like in every generation, I feel like this is a Buffy intro. In every generation, there are these cliques of actors, these companies of actors that emerge. And, a lot of them come from SNL, SCTV, people who were in The State, the comedy group. Some of them are actually also in History of the World Part 2. But there's, these people have the people that they like to work with, and they work with them over and over again. So, you see a lot of the comedy DNA from sitcoms from like the last, 6 or 7 years. So like, Ike Barinholtz, like a lot of people know him from the Mindy Project. Mm-hmm. And, there are a couple of Mindy Project alumni that are in there also. Nick Kroll is, the co-creator of Big Mouth. So there's a lot of people who have done voices for Big Mouth in this show as well. But I really like that the anchors, the producing anchors and writers are Wanda Sykes, Ike Barinholtz, and Nick Kroll, because there is, and I think we're going to start getting into some spoilers, which we haven't really done so far, but all the episodes are available. So we're okay. And we're warning you now. So if you don't want to hear the rest of the episode, you can just watch the rest of the episodes for the show and then come back and listen to ours. But I will say that the Big Mouth aesthetic includes everything from like more short form video to like social media inclusion and a bunch of F-bombs, which, I'm not going to say what that means because, we want to stay kid friendly. But there are definitely things in this show that probably won't appeal to History of the World Part 1's older audience. Because I can tell you that if I didn't understand I didn't understand that Borgs thing. I obviously know what TikTok and Cameo are about and more or less how they operate. But if I didn't follow most of that slang stuff, then I know my dad didn't either. And so I feel like it's it's drawing a line in between the different types of comedy. And although this series is definitely very Mel Brooks inflected in a literal sense, because he also narrates the scenes, I think that, it's possible that I think he just kind of stepped back a little bit and let the kids do what they wanted to, even though he was involved. And he is listed as a writer, I think, on all 8 episodes. But it's not really clear to me how much Mel Brooks is doing a lot of writing these days.
Yeah, but I will argue that there are like 3 scenes alone that I think would appeal to anybody and have no real, reference of social media at all. Like the Civil War doesn't really have any, there's no specific like alienators there. I think it's pretty like standard comedy. I would, also like the Curb Your Enthusiasm, Jesus bits. Like, I don't know how much that bit was for Gen Z. I think it was for anybody who grew up loving or just spent time watching Curb on HBO. And also like the Last Supper sessions, like that's a Beatles reference. Like they're totally making fun. Yeah, it was just on Disney Plus, so it's still relevant for everybody. But like, immediately who they're making fun of. And I feel like that spans all generations, whether or not you pick up with a phone.
Right.
And like are super involved. Also, like the note that I caught, that little detail is such a little blink and you miss it moment. I was just impressed because like I knew what it was and I was like, oh wow, like they really are trying to like, I mean, that's kind of the whole thing about a reboot, right? Like you take the thing that everybody loves and you say, hey, I think a younger generation might like this too. Let's try and make it for them also. Also, right? It's for everybody. And then the younger people who also have something to say. There was also like the Amelia Earhart bit that was really funny with
Hannah Einbinder.
Also, I think she was just doing a Jean Smart voice the whole time, which I thought was really funny because they are together on Hacks. Yeah, the Last Supper sessions was so funny to me. I just was cracking up the whole time, especially because they're going in and out of like really bad British accents, English accents.
They're Liverpudlian accents, they're doing impressions of the Beatles, obviously.
Right, right.
And, there's a clear Yoko parallel with
Mary.
With Mary Magdalene, like just contributing nonsense.
I think one of the things after a while, I was just kind of like, I love Nick Kroll. I think he's very funny, but I was kind of getting tired with like, because after a while, all of his voices started to sound the same. And I was just kind of like, there are so many funny people. Like, why are you doing this by yourself? Like after a while, I think there were like just 800 scheduling issues and they were just like, screw it, we'll just do it ourselves. It was kind of tiresome after a while.
I'll say one of the scenes that is one of the more Jewish scenes is the story of this shtetl family, the Mudman family. They make mud pies. His name is Schmuck Mudman.
Yes.
And his wife's name is Fanny. And they have a mud pie business in the shtetl. And then they end up migrating from the shtetl to Russia, where they foment some revolution before fleeing to America. And there were, in all of these scenes, there are a lot of Jews playing Jews. You have, Schmuck Mudman is played by Nick Kroll, obviously, again. We've got Pamela Adlon playing his wife. And then you said Robbie Hoffman is in there.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Joe Mandy. Yes. I always get him mixed up with Doug Mand, who writes with Dan Greger, who's married to Rachel Bloom. It's there's a lot of stuff to know. But I think that, that overall, there's been a lot of Jews playing Jews. You've got Seth Rogen as Noah. You've got Nick Kroll and Ike Barinholtz basically as pretty much everybody else. But I think there's a point in which, it's a classic TV Gone Jewy moment where Ike Barinholtz is playing General Grant. And they talk about like next week. And he's like, oh, I believe that's the holiday that the Hebrews call Pesach. And so like, it's just one of those things. And I probably like did a little guttural spit into the microphone as I said that. I'm not sure what that's going to sound like. But the idea, it really seemed to me like a callback to the next Tuesday, that Simchas Torah reference that's in Top Secret, maybe a movie that you're not even aware of.
Mm-mm.
If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's Val Kilmer. It's very slapsticky, a lot of puns. It was great. It was like the same era as Airplane. Have you seen Airplane?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay.
I love
So
that.
it's kind of like that. And I think that there are various points within this series that I felt like were either intentional honorings or an unintentional influence that made its way in.
Mm-hmm.
There's a section in, I think it's the ancient Rome section, or maybe it's in Jerusalem. I don't remember, but they're in an old city, and I won't say what it is, what happens there, but basically there's a segment that reminded me of a segment from the Monty Python Life of Brian. Anyway, there's just like a random something that happens there that you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And so I think that that's, when that kind of thing happens, you're like, well, that reminds me of that. Similarly, the Curb Your Judaism, which is the Curb Your Enthusiasm retelling of the story of Jesus and Judas and why he really betrayed Jesus and all of those things. There's a lot of Jesus stuff. I'm not sure why.
It was so much Jesus stuff. And like, I think they wanted to just keep hitting it over the head, like the joke of Judas betraying Jesus. I think they definitely made that point. But then I think there were 4 Jesus sketches throughout. And even that became a joke because at the end, just like all things in the modern world, they got a reboot. And the reboot also reflects the world we live in right now. And I think that was a very funny, cringy choice because it's supposed to be. So I get it. It was like a lot. Like the original never even focused on Jesus that long.
No, I think also there's something about that scene that you're talking about. It's a marketing meeting where they have like this focus group that talks about what kind of Jesus they want, what they want Jesus to look like. Because throughout the other sketches, they're not consistent in tone because they're lampooning different things. So like the first one is Curb Your Judaism is what I just said, but Curb Your Enthusiasm being like Curb Your Judaism, where they fixate on something like really small that ends up getting Larry/Judah in trouble at some point. They have the Notebook, the one that's like based on the Notebook. There's a sketch where it's about this love story between Mary and Jesus.
Yeah.
And again, like the Notebook came out how many years ago? Like, do we need a parody of the Notebook? It just seemed like very odd to me. And then the Beatles, the Jesus Sessions one is, I think that question is really the same story. It's just being played out in these different kind of parody contexts, which I appreciate. But I think that I'm also like always very nervous to tell professional comedians that they should have cut something. They didn't ask me, but I think that there are definitely places where I would have trimmed a whole series of sketches or at least one of the sketches. And one of those is this set of commercials for a statue removal service. And I was just like, I mean, I get why it's funny to start a business that's going to remove statues of problematic folks, but
yeah,
it was like three or four different.
It was
like
too
ones.
many.
It was too many.
It was not funny. And something I'm realizing is that all of the sketches that focused on women, where it was led by women, were like a minute long, and then they would like cut away and go to this like Civil War thing where that also felt like that was a little long. And like, I don't know, I would have liked to see more women's history in like a funny way or like a funny take on just women's history. Because I loved the Shirley bit. I thought that was excellent. But that was like the only one that really got multiple episode plot lines. And even that was like kind of silly because it was still sitcom format. And then Typhoid Mary was like funny, but like gross. And it was too gross to be funny sometimes. Like they didn't stretch it out long enough where it could actually be funny.
Yeah.
So I was bummed. Like Madeline Kahn, they would never do that to her. They would let her take the reins and go crazy. But I just didn't see a moment like that for anyone in particular.
Having just recently rewatched the original movie, I can tell you that there should have been like a whole lot more Madeline Kahn than there was. The fact that, they kind of pivoted the woman's lens to one of the Vestal virgins who was, fine, but like why. And also to Pamela Stevenson, who played the woman during the French Revolution scenes. And she was all just because her bust was up and out. You know, that was her entire personality. You know, I think that, like you said, the Shirley bits, which in which the story of congressperson and presidential candidate Shirley Chisholm was rendered as a like kind of 70s era sitcom, was very entertaining and very well done. And I just wanted that to be a whole episode where we just watched an episode of Shirley from start to finish. But there's a lot of skipping back and forth chronologically. So I wasn't like a huge fan of that.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed. But also the Jewish moments were fine. Like they were very like Ashkeforward. Like in a time where there are lots of comedians who are also Jews of color, like, and like in their orbit, they're like they're like the three most well-known comedy writers. They know so many people. I feel like they could have really done a good job having more voices in there and making like the Jewish bits funnier and say more than just the same thing we've always had. Like Mel Brooks was funny when he said something in the 80s because it hadn't been said before, even in the 90s, right? But like, we have that. So say something else and also have it be by Mel Brooks. How great, right? I think specifically like the Jews in Space and Hitler on Ice could have been hilarious. And I didn't laugh that hard. I thought they were fine.
I actually really liked the Hitler on Ice sketch because it was two Jewish guys and a Black lesbian who were commenting on Hitler's failure on the ice, which I thought was very kind of redemptive in some way.
Okay, so yes, I liked that those three were just profanity shitting on Hitler. Like, we loved that. But also, it didn't feel very clever. It just kind of felt like they were making fun of him because he was ice skating, which is funny because that's not what he was known for. But I wish ice skating was a metaphor for him taking over Europe. I wish they made more of a joke, kind of like in the Oslo Accords where they're comparing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for who will claim hummus. I wish they were talking about the ice skating, how he actually tried and failed to conquer the world. I feel like that might have been stronger for me. It just kind of felt like, oh yeah, they're just yelling at Hitler, which, yeah, no, I love. But it just felt like there were there were ways that Mel Brooks cleverly made fun of Hitler. And I didn't see that in this.
I think that it was really more of I don't want to call it smicha necessarily, but kind of like
what does
a
that
passing.
Mean?
Smicha is the process by which somebody is ordained as a rabbi. There's a laying on of hands and a transition of power from one generation of rabbis to a next.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying necessarily that was again, I don't know if they're we need to acknowledge Mel Brooks and the two most famous and most quoted one-offs are Hitler on Ice and Jews in Space. And so we need to make sure that those, start and end the series so that they're bookending and it's a callback, but it's also Mel Brooks gave us his hechsher,
Totally.
approval of its being kosher and, all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of things that they're trying to tackle here. And I think not all of them were done well. And, I think also part of it is that there are 8 episodes. And like you said before, that means it's longer than a movie. And I think
but the parts that were longer, we were we don't want those.
Right. So I don't know why a series instead of a movie. There's definitely comedy folks who I feel are missing from this slate, including Jenny Slate. And as you said, Tiffany Haddish. I think Jackie Tone and Rachel Bloom are missing from these projects.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned John Mulaney, and
I know why John Mulaney wasn't there.
Right.
I don't know. Alex Edelman. I feel like he's a really, really strong Jewish voice right now. His show in New York is doing really, really well. I would have loved to see what he had to say about this. I mean, he was one of the writers of the virtual Friday Night Seder. I would have loved to see his voice in the ring and Chloe Feynman and I don't know, any members of SNL aside from Fred Armisen from the last 15 years. I would have loved to see a Ted Lasso-esque, Jason Sudeikis moment making commentary on something. I don't know, Brett Goldman, like Goldstein?
Goldstein.
What the hell is that? Woof.
It's like
Freudian slip.
Steinberg, iceberg. What's the difference?
Also, there's a joke in there too, in the Civil War about that, which I think was funny. Not everyone's going to like that. And there's also a Freudian slip joke made by Taika, and that was great. Loved seeing him do masterclass. I thought that was funny. But like, I don't know, there were so many repeated faces that I was like, there are so many more voices that can be here. I will give a shout out to Kumail Nanjiani because I loved the Karma Sutra pitch where he was like, it doesn't work. He's like pitching the Karma Sutra and it doesn't work if it doesn't get paired with a soup. And I loved it. I thought that was so funny.
I think with most of these sketches, what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to make something funny, something silly. You're trying to criticize, a trend. You're trying to imagine how people in history might have dealt with contemporary tools. And it's a lot of different goals.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that came up for me when I was watching this, and I started watching the screeners way beforehand, but we are recording this on Purim. And you mentioned the Ikar spiel, and there's a lot of spieling happening here. It's like a kind of like a high quality Purim spiel fell into a vat of big mouth scripts, and then Mel Brooks came along with his comedy wand and went bling, gave it at the Hechsher.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some sketches that I really think reminded me of and were done better by Hayehudim Ba'im, which is a sketch comedy show in Israel that talks about Jewish history, which of course includes a lot of biblical history. And there's one that they do, which is like a Seinfeld parody. So I think that the sharpness of those sketches spoiled me. And now I expect it from all attempts at lampooning history.
Yeah.
Again, recording this on Purim and thinking about my past Purim spiel things that I used to do. And I used to write these sketches. And some of them were with my friend Rob Kuttner, who used to plan Purim spiels back in New York and has continued to do spieling here. I did a sketch called Desperate Matriarchs, which was like a parody of Desperate Housewives. And in the middle, it kind of broke for a segment called Law and Order SVU, Special Vashti Unit, where we talked about the story of Vashti. So I think, those kinds of lenses on, taking the Jewish and re-injecting it into popular culture format is something that, like, literally we've been doing in my family our whole lives, like all of us. My parents did it, and the force is strong in my family, as we say. But I think that I have a very high bar for this kind of stuff, and a lot of it just doesn't meet it. And I don't know if that's fair or if it's that my generation is neither Mel Brooks's nor Nick Kroll's. So I don't know how it all fits together. I think it's erratic. I don't think it's like consistent. And so there are some that work and some that don't. And I mean, that's very sketch. What happens with sketches is that you go to see a show, and even if they're all related sketches, you'll be like, oh, those three were funny and the others were fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, at what point you say it's fine. I will say that one more thing that I want to call out as you spoke about just briefly before, but I wanted to call out for a specific reason is the Oslo Accords cold open sequence that starts one of the episodes, because you see the people around the table, and it occurred to me, I was like, oh, they have Michaela Watkins playing Israel, the representative from Israel. And I'm like, oh, well, I remember Michaela went to Israel. I interviewed her for the Jewish Journal like a long time ago about her trip to Israel. So to me, that like landed, and I was like, oh, well, a representative of Israel is probably Jewish, and they went with a Jewish actor. That's great. And then I looked over and I saw Jason Mantzoukas playing Greece. And as you might know from his last name, he is Greek. And then I looked over and saw the placard that said Turkey was Darcy Carden from The Good Place, and Barry, and her father is from Turkey. So I really liked, one person could have been accidental, but this seems like a deliberate opportunity for people to play characters that are in some way connected to their actual heritage.
Yes,
so
and it doesn't have to mean anything. It's like, it doesn't mean that if you pick someone who wasn't, they wouldn't be as funny. But like they picked people who are funny people who also had a connection. Like they were still funny first. Like all of those people were very funny, and that cold open was very interesting. But like I think they just wanted to make the point that it's not as hard as you think it is. It's pretty easy. You just have to think about it. And I was like, it was pretty subtle. Yeah, that cold open was such a choice because they talked about it without actually like you said, like taking any risks.
Yeah. And I think, comedy, obviously, you can fill papers and books with the fact that comedy is about risk taking and, it should be sharp and should, punch up and all of that kind of stuff. But, I think the question of like, they decided to do this, the Oslo Accords and focus on hummus, I think it's a little bit of a cop out, and I think that some of the Jewish elements in this story were like that. So, kind of like cop outs rather than really engaging with it. But the question of like, what are we expecting from History of the World Part 2, to create a sharp satire? They kind of did a little bit with the Shirley stuff.
Yeah.
I really liked that because Wanda Sykes was great in it. They had the significant musical moments, even though I did miss the grandeur of that, like the Inquisition, that whole thing with the synchronized swimmers.
Oh, yes.
And so, yes, I did. I missed the Inquisition is really what you should come away from this podcast with.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's lots to enjoy and there's a lot of silly stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just take it with that grain of salt, I think you'll find something to love.
Yeah.
But you also may find something to kind of shrug your shoulders at and go, huh? Or,
Yeah.
Or I didn't like that at all.
It was fun. I had a good time watching it. We laughed. Like I would tell people to see it. Like I think there could have been really cool moments featuring really important comedy geniuses in the last 30 years that we really didn't get. In 1980, like Mel Brooks picked on really great people from history and from like the moment. And I wanted that here. And we did. We got that a little bit. But I also I don't know, I think the women were lacking. I think they should have had brighter moments because the women they picked were very funny and I wanted more from them. And not just like in an annoying way. Like I wanted that Amelia Earhart bit to be longer. I wanted more of that. I wanted more of Typhoid Mary and the actor that played her because she's very funny. I wanted more 21st century instead of like 1980.
Well, also, this group of folks, I don't really want to say like all of these folks, but there's a lot of focus on scatological humor. And I don't need a bunch of vomiting. I don't need a bunch of, diarrhea. I don't need all of that stuff. And I think that it also happened when I was, I watched Triangle of Sadness this weekend also.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Esther, I should have told you not to see that one.
I started watching Babylon.
I told you not to watch that.
I know
one
you told me not to. Right, but like I just need people to not like be focusing on diarrhea and I mean, look, I feel like it's just like such a little kid thing to be like.
That's why I told you not to watch it. It was gross, and you wouldn't have liked it.
Yeah, those are examples where it's not necessarily used for comedy. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But Triangle of Sadness, it was definitely not comedic. What was happening?
It was awful.
Right? It was horrifying.
Woof.
Right? But in comedy, you can always rely on farts. You can always rely on diarrhea. You can always rely on vomit.
It's just lazy.
But I don't like it when people do. Like, and especially if there's so much of it immediately, it's everything everywhere all at once, but it's a vomit universe, It's like, I don't need that. Like, I think a couple of well-placed individual scatological things would be fine. Is this Purim Torah? I don't know. Like, I just feel like the bathroom humor is just a little much for me.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so you would recommend people to see this. You would tell people go check it out.
Yeah, I would say check out a couple of episodes because, they're all different. I think, there's some things that, like I said, have a narrative through line across multiple episodes, but there's new stuff in every episode too. So if you're interested in, how this saga has continued and also by proxy, what comedy voices are kind of the heirs to the throne of the Your Show of Shows crew, which is, Sid Caesar and Mel Brooks and all that groovy stuff. I think it's worth seeing. I think that, obviously, if you don't like the stuff that I don't like, then maybe skip the intro. I think it's of episode 3, but there's some interesting stuff here. And like you said, I had a good time. And that's an important thing to do, is to have a good time sometimes.
That is important.
Without overthinking it, which is basically what we just spent the last, 40 minutes or so doing, is overthinking it. But that's why you're here. That's our hallmark.
So entering the speed round, I'll take this one, Esther. It is the Oscars this weekend, and I'm honored. A couple people have already messaged me saying, help me with my Oscar ballot. I printed them out at work. I've been handing them out to people. I have 2, because I have one with my Oscar brain where I go, okay, this is what I think will win. And then I have one where I'm like, this is what I want to win. And sometimes they're very similar. But if you need help with your Oscar ballot, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to help. Or you can go to Movie Savant, Jody Berman Kostanovich, and you can check out her podcast, Two Movie Jews, or you could go to her blog, which is Jody's Oscar blog, or Berman Oscar blog.blogspot.com. I think just an overview, if you're not really sure what you want to win, I think it's very safe to say Everything Everywhere All at Once will take home the big awards, directing, Best Picture, Best Actress.
Do you think that the Daniels will really beat Spielberg?
I do. And I think they're going to give Spielberg Best Screenplay as a way to say, we love you. We love your work. We know it's the most vulnerable thing you've ever made. And we're going to give you Best Screenplay because it's your story. There's a wonderful, wonderful feature in the LA Times about Spielberg and his sisters. And it feels so beautiful and sentimental. And it just feels like you're hanging out with them at lunch. So I definitely recommend people go read that. But I do think Everything Everywhere is going to take home the big awards. And I think Best Animation should go to Jenny Slate's Marcel the Shell, but it's going to go to Pinocchio. So if you want to win in the Oscar ballot, go with Pinocchio. But I would be so thrilled to be wrong. I would love for Marcel to win because I think it was just so clever and brilliant. But also Pinocchio was really beautiful in its animation. So there. And I think Black Panther's going to win an Oscar for acting this year. And I think that's very exciting because I don't think they've won that before. So that would be very cool. And speaking of the Oscars and Jenny Slate, she's had a big year because she was also in Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you don't remember, she was the girl on the phone with the dog. And they referred to her character as Big Nose, which is weird.
I think not in the act. Did they say Big Nose, or was it just in the credits?
In the credits, but also I think there's a reference. I think one of the characters goes, oh, we have to go after her. And like, she just throws out, I think it might be Big Nose, like woman with big nose or something. But it is there in the credits. It is a little strange, feels a little anti-Semitic, but also it just felt very weird. And a couple people flagged it and they thought that was strange. But the Daniels did change the name to Debbie, the dog mom, for the streaming release of the film in response to the criticism. And they even said they regretted that the character's name created awkward and unfortunate controversy. And they also told in an interview, they said that there was a scene that talked more about her character beyond her nose, but that was cut from the final version.
I love reactions like that, where they're like, oh, we had it, but we cut it. I'd be like, well, then you don't have it. Like, you cut it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole problem. We saw this with Moon Knight also, where the writer was like, we had some really important stuff in there, and then we cut it. And it's like, well, that's fine. But like, it's kind of like having a boyfriend or girlfriend that lives in Canada. Like, you can't disprove it, but doesn't sound like really convincing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And who could have thought that using the term Big Nose might have annoyed some people? Although I do think, when I think of Big Nose as a character name, I think there's a sketch in Monty Python's Holy Grail, I think, that was like, they start calling him Big Nose. Somebody calls him Big Nose. Anyway, but I don't, when you use the term Big Nose, please remember to give your character an actual name. That's helpful.
Yeah. I mean, and it goes with like any stereotype. I mean, there's a lot of questionable side characters that are literally like not great. I don't even want to say them. They're just like not great. And if you go through movies, they're in there all the time. And it's just very weird. And so I like Debbie the dog mom. That's a little more descriptive, especially the role her character plays as the movie goes on. But yeah, the Oscars are this weekend, and I don't think anyone's going to be talking about The Slap. I think they're going to be talking about Chris Rock's live Netflix special that happened over the weekend, and I think that's kind of great to go into the new Oscar season talking about what happened last Oscar season.
It's still so unbelievable that happened.
I know.
It's still so weird. Yeah, I think that, the Oscars, they always try to say, well, what's going to happen this year? And I think whatever happens this year, we know it's not going to be as odd and talked about as it was last year.
I will say, though, I loved the 3 female hosts we had last year, and I'm disappointed that the Oscars got scared and went back to milquetoast Jimmy Kimmel. Not that Jimmy Kimmel's not funny. It's just he's done it so many times. I'm like, we don't need him to save the show and keep things safe. A security detail, I think, would do that just fine.
Unless Tina and Amy are doing it, like I don't have any, where they say I don't have a dog in this fight. Like I want there to be more representation for women, for sure. Better representation for women, for sure. And so a little bit of creativity exercised in, this show. I always loved it when Billy Crystal did his little songs, because that was joyous and celebratory. So I hope that they can capture some of that spirit this year. Jimmy Kimmel usually does something playful. So I guess we'll probably at least have that, even if it's not too groundbreaking.
We shall see. And yeah, I think that's it for us this week.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been The Bagel Report, a production of Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, and a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Thank you to Lev Gringaz, our producer from Jew Folk Inc., David A.M. Walensky and Andrew Essenston, and Danny Lipsky for creating our logo. You can find us wherever podcasts are listened to. Connect with us on social, on Twitter, at Esther K, at Eben Moshe, and at The Bagel Report, on Instagram at Esther Kostanowitz, at Eben Moshe, and TBR the Pod, and by emailing us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. Now go and watch something interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it next time on The Bagel Report.